Merry Christmas. This is a 6/8 Waveos Ranchero from CaleeBoard Factory in Pacifica. It's a performance twin fin egg, and I'm going to show you how I glassed and finished it. We're finally back in the surfboard tent just in time for Christmas. We're going to finish this board. This is a shape I'm licensing from CaleeBoard Factory. Shaper's name's Casey up in Pacifica. He makes some super sick shapes. We're going to finish this board. We're going to put fins in it. We're going to color it, and then we're going to glass it. Here we go. First, we're going to mark where the fins are. For this board, we're going to put the trailing edge a little over 8 inches from the tail. We're going to put the rear of the fins in about 1.5 inches from the rails, and then do about a 3/16 toe in. So I'll use my handy dandy shaper square from foamez to knock that out. Alright, so I got the shaper square placed, measured off the side there. We use these lines to line up with the stringer to make sure it's straight. We're going to mark in the trailing edge of the fin, and then we'll come up here and do the toe in. After looking at those initial markings, I decided a 3/16 toe in was a little bit more than I wanted, so I dialed it back out, and we're going to use the outer markings as a 1/4 inch toe in. To round out the fin boxes, I'm going to use the Futures 1-pass system. I always use Future fins because obviously they're way better than FCS. So this board I'm going to be doing the color with the water-based Montana spray paint again, and I really like the exposed wood stringer, especially because this has a tritone stringer on it. So I just use some 1/8 inch masking tape, and I'm going to mask off the stringer before we start painting. So the board's painted, pretty much cured. I don't care if there's some off-gassing or leaching of the paint into the resin from out of the fin boxes, so I'm going to go ahead and put the fin boxes in. Before you install the boxes, go ahead and rough them up a little bit with some 180 grit or even higher or lower grit sandpaper. You just want to get a little bit rough so there's some crevices in there for the resin to bite onto. Because this board is uniform in color, I'm going to use clear resin. I could do free laps, but I've always done cut laps, so I'm still going to mask the top. I'm just not going to do it perfect, and then we're going to do cut laps on it. Got a little pressure dent in the board, but it looks like only a pressure dent, so if heat gun, it'll pop back out. Looks like it did the trick. Before glassing, I like to put the screws in the fin boxes, just because after you sand these down and get them all nice and flush, you can mess up or kind of get wonky the initial starting threads. So putting the screws in before you do any sanding is super helpful. And then after masking them, I buy the tape that's already the proper width for Futures boxes. Highly recommend it. It's a lot less labor intensive than using normal masking tape and then having to cut it later. So to know how much resin to mix up, there's this handy chart from Greenlight Surf Supply that gives you the different size board, the different weights of cloth, and the different laminating processes. So for the bottom coat, this board is 6/8, and we're using 6-ounce cloth. So 6/8 puts us in this area, and then the minimum amount of resin we need, so that's if we're super efficient, is 21 ounces. And then if we are super sloppy beginner, it recommends mixing up 29 ounces. mostly cured but still slightly tacky. We're going to flip it over, cut the laps, and then also cut the fin box masking off. And to save yourself some sanding later, I'm blending these laps. These little rubber rollers. It's meant for, I believe, wallpaper. Do that, put some pressure, and kind of press this lap joint down. Before we laminate the deck, I need to go sand down the little overlap air pocket areas on the glass at the nose and a little bit on the tail. Actually laminated pretty cleanly, so there's not too much to do. I was going to do this board 4+6 on top. Unfortunately, I'm out of 4-ounce fiberglass, so it's going to be 6-on-6 on top. So if you're seeing this board in Linda Mar, this will dent your board. It won't dent mine. Before we do the hot coat, we need to put the leash plug in. I know I'm a huge Futures fan, but I actually prefer FCS leash plugs because all you need is a 1 1/8 hole saw and then just a simple guide you make by drilling that hole saw through a piece of plywood, and then I have some yoga mat foam on the back here just for cushion. So we'll tape this down in place, drill out the hole, and then put in the leash plug. Then a screwdriver to pry it out, and a chisel helps with getting the flat ends on the stringer. Okay, we got our resin, our fin plug, our glass. I got some turquoise powder here, pigment, which I'm going to put in there to color it, and then our catalyst, and let's blend it in. Alright, the board is cleaned off and ready for the hot coat. For hot coating, I make my own sanding resin using laminating resin and then some surfacing agent. This is just wax suspended in a solvent. Add to this and boom, you got sanding resin. So we're going to mask off the sides, mask off the fin box, and then do the hot coat. Unfortunately, the camera died when I was doing the hot coat on the bottom, but same process pretty much as hot coating the top, so I'm going to show that right now. The hot coat went on pretty nice and smooth, so I'm going to start the sanding at 220 grit. Before I switch to the power sander, I'm going to use this little hand sander to knock down the overlap line on the rails. Okay, we got the board all sanded. I have it strung up in my painting booth now. I like to do my top coat with this spray acrylic finish. This is Rust-Oleum Ultra Cover 2X. I prefer the satin finish. Gloss is too hard to polish, and matte just looks too flat, so the satin's what I like to go with. I prefer this over doing a resin gloss coat or a polishing coat, just because it's less work and it adds a lot less weight. And, yeah. The clear coat has sat overnight, so it's mostly cured, and now
One of my favorite parts is wet sanding, so there's some kind of texture to this where it didn't sit down nice and even. So hit it with some high, I'm starting with 2000 grit, and gonna wet sand it.